I almost didn't hit the brakes. I wish I was the kind of person who always pulls over for trouble. But that night, I was 15 miles from home, fog curled low like a living thing, rain still on the asphalt, and all I wanted was a quiet apartment and a heavy glass of scotch. Then the shape by the guardrail lifted a hand just an inch, just enough to say, "I'm still here." Tell me honestly, if it were you half asleep and half done with the world, what would you have done? Keep driving and pray someone else stops, or slam the pedal and let your seatbelt cut a line across your chest you'll feel for days. My name is Ryan Carter. I run a company that eats calendar squares and spits out headlines, and most nights I have a driver because the city and the numbers never sleep. But that night, James called in sick, the meeting ran long, the storm moved through like a bad mood, and I was behind the wheel of my own car feeling like a tourist in a country I used to live in. The road was a silver ribbon, the mile marker slid by, and then the silhouette on the shoulder clicked from inanimate to alive. In my brain, a woman collapsed in a way no body chooses, one arm angled across the gravel, like a flare that never caught fire. Instinct is a blunt instrument until it isn't. I was out of the car and into the wet before the engine fan spun down my shoes, filled with cold water. My breath came hot and ragged in the fog, and I heard myself say what you say when you have no idea what to say. "Hey, can you hear me?" Up close, there was that terrible catalog you do without wanting to. A cut over the left eye, swelling, trying to close it. Her jacket torn at the shoulder like someone reached and yanked dirt under her nails, the way it gets there when you fight. Without thinking, you're fighting a shallow, tight breath that made my throat close around her air, like I didn't trust the world to keep it coming. "My bag," she whispered, "almost nothing. Almost wind." Someone took it. Then her eyes rolled back and she floated away, and I did. The dumb and necessary thing I called 911, gave them the mile marker, the direction the injuries said, words like conscious and seizure risk, and airway clear like a man who knows television, medicine, and terror in equal measures. The dispatcher told me help was coming, but we were a long way from help. And time gets mean when you sit inside it and watch it go. There's a rule about moving injured people, and I broke it carefully. One arm under her shoulders, one under her knees, everything slow, everything apologetic, everything a prayer said through clenched teeth. She was lighter than I expected, like the rain had squeezed weight from her, like the night had taken a tax. I set her in the back seat with my jacket rolled under her head, cracked a window for the smell of the storm, checked the mirror to make sure her chest kept rising, and I drove like the left lane was a promise someone finally meant. If you've ever chewed a steering wheel with your jaw, you know what that half hour felt like. The ER doors opened with that smug sound they make. The, "We've got this hero, go sit down and shake" sound. And then there were hands and questions, nurses who move like choreographers, a doctor with night on his face, a security guard who watched me not like a suspect, just like a man who might fall over. "Name," they asked. "I don't know," I said. "ID," they asked. "Robbed," I said. "Relation," they asked. "None," I said, and felt the small pinprick of that admission. They took her away the way medical people do, fast, without panic. A gurney disappearing through a door that says authorized, as if the word can keep bad outcomes out. And I was left in a waiting room that smelled like coffee burned low, and lemon cleaner, my suit cuffs wet my knees, remembering the gravel, my hands deciding whether to shake or go numb. Here's where I tell you I left, because I had nothing to add, because I'm a CEO. And decisions wait on me because I did my civic duty. Except I sat down and I stayed. There's a glue to some moments, you know, the kind that keeps you where you are, even when the door is right there, even when the person at the desk says we'll call you if we need you. The TV in the corner tried to sell me a pill with side effects longer than its promises. A toddler wailed into a mother's sweater. A man in steel-toed boots fell asleep with his cap over his eyes. And time did that rubber band thing, where it snaps and sags, and you don't know if it's been 20 minutes or 2 hours. A nurse with eyes like a kind teacher came over, said, "You brought in the Jane Doe," and I stood too fast, like I could run to the answer. "She's stable," she said. "Doctor's with her. Do you know if she has any allergies, any conditions?" I shook my head and hated shaking it. She said someone took her bag. I offered, like the last puzzle piece that isn't even from that puzzle. "We'll let the police know," she said, and wrote it down in neat letters that made it feel more real. A doctor followed after, the kind of wait that teaches you something about your own breathing. "You found her," he said, not a question. "She's sedated, mild concussion, contusions, some nasty bruising. Nothing that looks like it's going to steal her future. A brief visit wouldn't hurt if you're up for it." He studied me like he was looking for the crack where the whole man goes out, then nodded toward a hallway and held the door. The room was gray in that hospital way, machines blinking like city windows, an oxygen line sweeping under her nose, an IV humming life into a vein that looked too fragile to volunteer. Her face was clean, now the blood wiped away the damage, obvious, but not defining. And under it, under the temporary map of the night, the permanent landmarks, the cheekbones, the mouth, the lashes, the little freckle I remember by her left ear where the light catches, and I said her name like a betrayal and a benediction at the same time. Elena. I hadn't said it out loud in 5 years. Saying it felt like stepping onto a floor I couldn't believe was still there. If you've ever loved someone so much that your chest learned their shape, you know how a memory can rush back and knock the wind out of you. You know how the soundtrack of your life can cut out for a beat and then come back. Changed. We met in college the way people do in movies that get real. I was the ambitious business kid who wore ambition like cologne. She was the student who worked at the health center and made 20 minutes at a triage desk feel like you'd been seen by God. She laughed too easily at my bad jokes, then taught me to tell better ones. She could say my name in 3 different tones, and each meant, "Hold your horses, look at me, come home." The last year we were together, my father died. He left me a company half on fire, and I became the version of myself that leaves dinner early and sleeps at the office and forgets the way a kitchen smells when someone is cooking just for you. She stood at our counter at 2 a.m, with her hands flat, and said, "I don't know who I'm talking to." And I said words about timing and phases, and when this is over, and then one day it was nothing. Not a fight, not a door slam, just quiet where she used to be. Yeah, that happened. I sat there holding the rail of her bed like it was a conversation, and I didn't plan to sleep, but you know how your body cheats. My head went down, the monitor hummed, the door whispered. Dawn crept gray and pink along the wall, and she stirred the way people do when the world starts to bargain with them again. Fingers twitch, breath shifts, eyes drag themselves open like they're heavy-lidded from a night you can't remember. And then her gaze found me unfocused, then sharp, then 1,000 expressions in a second. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, anger, relief, fear. And she said my name and I forgot how to swallow. "Ryan." "Hey." I said, soft, steady, the way you talk to a skittish animal and the version of yourself you don't want to scare off. "You're safe." "Hospital. Last night. I found you on the highway." Her hand went to the bandage in a slow orbit. She winced at the tenderness. She tried to sit up, and the nurse brain in her told her to stop. "My bag," she said, eyes going wide like the memory lit up. "They took my bag, my phone, my ID, everything." "The police know," I said. "They're on it." her eyes filled with that furious water that says I didn't deserve this, and also I'm so tired, and she came back to the question I deserved to be asked. "Why are you here?" she said. I took the breath that tells the truth. "Because you needed help, and then I realized it was you, and I couldn't walk away even if we'd never met." A detective came mid-morning, middle-aged, tired like a man, who has learned to sleep in pieces, eyes that wanted the facts more than he wanted my story. "Miss Brooks, I'm Martinez. Can you tell me anything you remember?" And Elena did carefully, the way you watch your own words so they don't turn into blame. Car died around 10:30. A truck pulled over, a man got out, looked helpful, talked about jumper cables. When I popped the hood, he grabbed me from behind, demanded my purse. I fought. He took it, drove away. Martinez asked the questions detectives ask, not because he believes they'll get the whole truth from a victim in a hospital bed, but because this is how you start the list of doors you're going to knock on. Height, weight, clothing, any markings, any voice details, and she gave him what she had, medium height. Heavy-set baseball cap, work boots, a smell like cheap cologne and gasoline. "Phone in the bag," he asked, and she nodded. "We'll try to ping it," he said. "Roadside apps keep logs we can subpoena." He turned to me. "You the one who brought her in?" I said yes, and the gratitude in his eyes was small, but not nothing. "You did good," he said, and left us with the weight that follows you when someone promises to try. The nurse came back with a stack of forms and a smile that said, "I know a story when I see one." And after she left, Elena looked at me and said the thing that changed the second half of my life. "Don't fix this with money," she said. "Don't make calls and throw names. Just be here." Can you do that? It hit me like a truth I'd been avoiding because it was inconvenient. I have spent years being very good at sending help. I'm less practiced at sitting next to it while it breathes. "I can do that," I said, and then I actually did something I never do. I took out my phone. I texted my assistant Jennifer, and I said, "Clear my calendar today and tomorrow. And call Maplewood General, ask about a patient named Diane Brooks. I want to know what her oncologist needs before I decide I know better." Jennifer texted back a single question mark and then a yes. If you work for me long enough, you learn to stop asking why and start building bridges ahead of me. When Elena was discharged, there was the practical problem that takes a big story and makes it real. No bag, no phone, no wallet. A car that had given up 3 hours away from her mother, who was probably standing by the window of a small house watching the road, with that scared calm caregivers get. "I'll drive you," I said, before she could tell me about buses or friends she didn't want to worry. "It's 3 hours," she said. "I know," I said. "You can't run your company from the interstate." "Watch me," I said. And it wasn't bravado, it was a promise to myself I didn't know I knew how to make. We didn't talk for the first 20 minutes of that drive. Not because there was nothing to say, because the words had to learn how to be near each other again. The fields outside the city looked like forgiving things. The sky was that clear blue that makes the world feel doable. And then she said, "I'm scared to see my mom. She tries to be brave for me, but last time she'd lost so much weight, I couldn't say anything nice except, 'Your cheekbones are still rude.'" I laughed, the first genuine one since the night before. "She always liked you," Elena said. "She said you were going to do great things." "She didn't tell me to answer my phone at dinner," I said. "She did, and I told her you were saving the world." I was wrong about the timing. We stopped at a diner halfway to Maplewood, red vinyl booths that crack when you shift coffee that somehow tastes like the definition of coffee, even if it isn't good. A waitress who called us honey with a sincerity that belongs to small towns and nurses. We split grilled cheese and a burger because appetite follows safety, and we took turns asking the questions people ask when they're holding the end of a rope that used to be a knot. "Do you regret it?" I said, leaving like that. She chewed carefully, like the answer needed teeth. "Yes, for the pain, no, for the choice," she said. "I would have turned into a version of myself I don't like if I stayed. I couldn't compete with a company you were trying to keep alive. I was losing little pieces of myself every day." "Do you think that's fair?" I asked, not to defend myself, just to set the geometry right. "Fair is the wrong word," she said. I think it was true. If you've ever had someone tell you a truth about yourself you were avoiding, you know how it hurts and heals at the same time. Maplewood looked like a place drawn from memory. A main street with a hardware store where the owner knows the size of your hands and sells you gloves that fit a library with a hand-painted sign that says Story Hour Wednesday. A bakery that smells like cinnamon and clean ovens. Diane opened the door, and everything happened at once. Her hands on Elena's cheeks, the way mothers touch their children, like they're still 3, and the world is a hallway. Her eyes taking inventory, like a nurse who never turns it off. And then her focus found me, and she smiled the way people smile at an old friend who owes them nothing and still shows up. "Ryan," she said, "look at you," and it was not about my suit or my haircut. It was about a boy she knew who turned into a man who needed to learn a new thing. The next hour was tea poured too full and cookies pressed into my hand, like a contract, an edited version of last night, with the parts that would keep Diane's pulse steady kept out. A hug I didn't expect because she's not strong enough for hugging. But she did it anyway, and then she excused herself to lie down, and Elena and I were left in a small living room, with sunlight knifing across a rug that had seen better days. "Thank you," she said. "I hate needing help. You know that." "I know," I said. "And I hate being the guy who thinks help is something you can FedEx." We sat for a minute in that weird peace that comes after a storm when the gutters are still crying. Here's the part where the story veers the twist that didn't care about my intentions or my best behavior. Jennifer called while I was putting away 2 mugs in a cabinet that had been painted and repainted the way thrift furniture gets. "I have updates," she said, voice crisp. "Brain 3 moves ahead. Maplewood General confirms Diane Brooks, stage 3, chemo scheduled. Next week I put in a request for a consult with Dr. Huang, top of the list." "Thank you," I said, and she kept going. Legal reached out to the county detective Martinez, asked for the phone's IMEI to ping service provider, will respond to subpoena, but there's another angle. The roadside assistance app logs location pings with a third-party data broker. Our portfolio has exposure to that broker through a growth fund, Hamilton Ridge minority stake. She paused. "We're investors, Ryan. Not directly, but yeah." It took a second to land. My stomach did that elevator drop. I looked at Elena across the room holding a mug with both hands, like it was warm enough to fix anything. And I felt a kind of shame that tastes like metal. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. And maybe make you mad. It made me mad. Detective Martinez called an hour later with his own piece of the map. "We pulled camera from a gas station, 2 exits from where you found her," he said. "Guy in a cap pickup paid cash, asked the clerk for Wi-Fi, then asked if she'd seen a disabled vehicle use the name Brooks. We think he scraped the name from the roadside app ping data broker middleman. We're subpoenaing logs." I thanked him, promised him what you promise cops when your money can help without corrupting the case, and hung up into a quiet that felt like I'd been implicated by a ghost. Elena stared at me. "So he knew my name because I pressed a button that said, 'Help,'" she said. "He knew where I was because I did the responsible thing." Looks like it, I said. Do you think that's fair? She asked, and it wasn't a rhetorical question, it was a trial. Here's the truth. I can't soften. I have made a lot of money investing in things that make other things more efficient. Efficient isn't a moral word until the day it is. I called my co-CEO and said I wanted the cap table, the service agreements, the privacy policy clauses where the word consent shows up like a fig leaf. I said if Henderson wanted to close their acquisition, with that exposure, they could do it without me. The board said words like fiduciary and material risk and public relations. I said words like human and harm, and we will not be the reason a man knows a woman's name on the side of a highway. We voted to delay. Henderson threatened to sue. I said put them on the calendar and bring me my suit that says I came to play. You know what I mean. Elena didn't ask me for details. She has never cared about percentages or press releases. She asked me if I was doing what I could with what I had, and when I said I was trying, she nodded like that was the currency we trade in now. That night, we sat on her mom's porch swing, under a sky that had the decency to be clear, and we talked about presence like it was a skill set instead of a feeling. Providing is not the same as being here, she said, and I wrote it in my head like a sticky note. I don't know if I remember how to be just Ryan, I said, and she squeezed my hand like a coach. Then practice, she said, not with speeches, with Tuesday morning and bad coffee and rides to chemo. That became our life for a while. I went back to the city for 48 hours and told the board I was promoting my COO to co-CEO and moving myself to a chair role high level, no daily news, no 7 a.m. crises unless the building was on fire. My phone buzzed off the table with men who were very worried about my legacy and their bonuses. I drove back to Maplewood with the kind of relief you feel when you take off a jacket you didn't know was heavy until you set it down. I started showing up not with answers, with presence. I learned to sit with Diane through the waves of chemo nausea without trying to fix it with a plan. I delivered soup and found the pillow that actually helps and didn't talk when talking would only make the room noisier. At the clinic, I watched Elena move through people like a lantern. The worried parent who calms because she took their fear seriously, the teenager who rolled their eyes into a laugh because she did a stupid dance right there in the hallway. The old man who came for blood pressure meds and stayed to talk about his wife for 5 minutes. He hadn't been gifted all week. I know exit multiples and enterprise value. That afternoon, I learned a new metric: touches per hour that matter. On the anniversary of the night the road tried to keep her, I asked Elena to drive with me, and she said yes without asking where. We pulled over at the same mile marker the shoulder coned off, because I was not going to be the idiot proposing in live traffic, the air cold enough to clean you out the light. That winter kind of honest, she wrapped her arms around herself, not because she was cold, because remembering is a bodily function. It makes you hold yourself together on instinct. Why here, she said, and I said, because this is where I learned to be a person again. I took a ring from my pocket, the one I bought a lifetime ago and couldn't use because life did what life does, and I went to my knee on a surface that did not deserve it, and I said, I lost you once because work was a god I prayed to with my whole life. I will never make that mistake again. Will you marry me? And the yes came out of her like she'd been saving it in a drawer for this exact second. We both cried. Traffic rolled by like the world had other problems. In the video of my life in my head, the soundtrack goes quiet there. 2 people, 1 tired road, a promise that felt like throwing a match into the dark and watching it turn out to be a light. If you want the montage. We had a small wedding behind the little house I bought in Maplewood. White flowers, someone's aunt arranged on a folding table, music played by a neighbor who has more soul than rhythm and more heart than either vows that said things like, I will be present, not just generous. I will ask before I fix. I will choose you when my calendar threatens to choose for me. People clapped and no one filmed us except for the kids who film everything. And the photos look like we're regular humans with bad angles and great joy. We took some of my money and made a foundation with a name that doesn't matter and a mission that does. Clinics like the one Elena works in get grants that aren't paperwork purgatory transport vouchers. So appointments don't get missed because gas money is a luxury. A patient advocate who sits on the phone with the insurance company for you so you don't lose an entire afternoon of your life to hold music. We also took on data privacy like I was picking a fight with a windmill because I needed the work. It turns out there are plenty of lawyers who would love to help you make better rules if your check's clear and your resolve is real. We also fight sometimes not like we used to. We don't use silence as punishment or schedules as shields. When I miss something, because a crisis is actually a crisis, I say, I messed up, and she says thank you for saying it, and we find the middle where we can stand. When she is afraid that the calendar will grow teeth again and eat the evenings, she says, I need reassurance, and I put my phone face down, and we talk like we're putting bricks back into a wall that once fell down. You know what I mean. There's a part of me that wanted this story to end neat bow on top, lesson delivered. Life laughed at that. Henderson sued us for delaying the integration. We countersued for breach of the ethics clauses. We had the foresight to write into our contracts. Lawmakers called me to testify at a hearing where I became the poster boy for a system that eats privacy for breakfast and then wonders why indigestion hurts. I said what I knew, that consent buried in an app nobody reads is not consent. That location pings sold to middlemen can get a woman hurt on a dark road, that we should not need a billionaire's conscience to fix a pipeline designed to leak. The cameras liked me because money talking about its own sins gets clicks. The work is slower than the story you want. New contracts take months. Divestments take lawyers and accountants and patience. People say thank you in emails and then sell your data again on a different line of a similar spreadsheet. I did not save the world. I made some small parts of it slightly less dangerous for people who press a button when their car dies. Do you think that's enough? Or do you think it's showy penance from a guy who feels guilty because the person he loves bled on the road? 2 years after the wedding, we cut a ribbon on an expanded clinic in Maplewood, a new wing with Diane's name over the entry because she asked if that was too much, and I said, nothing is too much if it makes you smile like that. Elena spoke at the podium without notes because she doesn't use notes to say what her chest knows. She talked about consistent compassion and the discipline of small help, she said. We don't need heroes as much as we need neighbors, and a room full of people cried without trying to hide it. After a kid ran up and asked if I was the man who picked his aunt up on the highway last year when she blew a tire, and I said no, that was someone else and that was better, because culture is contagious if you let it be. We had a daughter on the rainy night. In the fall, we named her Hope because we are those people now, and I am not sorry. And the day we brought her home, I put my hand on her tiny chest and felt the drum there, and I thought, this is the only metric I care about now. Elena watched me like she was remembering the person I used to be and loving the person I am learning to be, and she said, we did not get here because we got lucky. We got here because we made hard decisions on bad days and did not quit. And I said, that's the whole sermon. On the 10th anniversary of the night the road tried to take her, we drove back to the mile marker with our kid in the back seat, asking why the numbers are green, and what does mean, and can she have a snack? And we parked just far enough off the shoulder to be smart and close enough to remember. And I told Hope this is where I learned the difference between helping and saving. That I did one, and the professionals did the other, that any person with a working heart can pull over and make a different world for 20 minutes. Like a superhero, she said, and I said no, like a person, and that is better. Elena slipped her hand into mine, looked out at the gray line of the road, and asked me the question that still makes my chest feel complicated. You think it was fate or just coincidence, she said. Second chances are what you do with them, I said. Whatever it was, we did our part. We got back in the car, and the world kept doing what it does. That's the thing I want to leave with you. We want our stories to solve something beyond our story. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they just give us a roadmap for what love looks like when you stop treating it like a side project. If you take anything from this take that presence beats provision, when the person in front of you is scared, take that consent you can't find. Is not consent, take that. It is okay to walk away from money that makes you sick, even if people call you names in legal letters. Now I want to hear from you, really. Was I right to blow up a deal because a line on a spreadsheet might have helped a man hunt a woman on a highway? Or did I only care when the harm got personal, and that makes me part of the problem? Should clinics like ours depend on foundations and donors who wake up feeling generous? Or should we build a system where basic care isn't charity, but infrastructure? If it were you on that road with your phone in your hand and your data in 100 hands, you never met, what would you have done, and what would you want someone like me to do differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Argue with me if you need to tell me where you think I'm wrong, or where something like this happened to you, and what you learned. Share this with the one friend who needs to hear that you don't have to be perfect to choose the right thing on a hard night. And if you've got a second chance story, love, work, family, yourself, tell it, because somebody watching this at 2 in the morning needs your proof that the detour might be the road.